Though separated by decades, ideology, and geography, the Venezuelan blockade sanctions regime and the U.S.-led blockade of Cuba follow a strikingly similar historical logic. Both are modern examples of how great powers use economic pressure as a weapon, turning nations into battlegrounds without firing a single shot. At the heart of both cases lies the same method: economic isolation to force political change. Cuba, 1960s present. The U.S. embargo aimed to suffocate the Castro government economically, hoping hardship would trigger rebellion or regime collapse. Venezuela, 2010 as present. Sanctions and restrictions targeted oil exports, banking access, and international trade, intending to weaken the Maduro government. In both cases, the goal was not immediate military defeat, but internal implosion. Ideology provided moral cover. Cuba was framed as a communist threat during the Cold War. Venezuela is portrayed as an authoritarian socialist state, undermining democracy in the Western Hemisphere. The language changes, but the narrative remains constant: containment, punishment, and deterrence. Perhaps the most haunting similarity is who bears the cost. Shortages of food, medicine, and basic goods defined everyday life in blockaded Cuba. In Venezuela, sanctions exacerbated shortages, inflation, and humanitarian crises. In both cases, governments survived, but ordinary citizens paid the price, raising enduring ethical questions about collective punishment. Neither blockade achieved its central aim. Cuba's revolutionary government endured for decades, adapting through rationing, black markets, and external allies. So far, Venezuela's leadership remained in power, turning sanctions into propaganda tools and tightening internal control. Isolation often strengthened nationalist sentiment, allowing leaders to blame foreign enemies for domestic failures. Both crises became symbols in larger geopolitical struggles. Cuba was a Cold War chess piece between the U.S. and the Soviet Union. Venezuela became a node in modern great power rivalry, engaging Russia, China, and regional allies. Thus, blockades were not just about one country, but about signaling dominance on the global stage. History reveals a cruel irony. Economic blockades intended to weaken regimes often harden them, reducing space for dissent while increasing state control over scarce resources. Cuba and Venezuela demonstrate that external pressure can freeze political systems rather than transform them. The Venezuelan blockade echoes the Cuban blockade not as a copy, but as a modern variation of an old strategy: economic warfare justified by ideology, endured by civilians, and resisted by resilient regimes. Both cases remind the world that blockades change economies faster than governments, and suffering does not always translate into surrender.